1-800-685-7596. Call now.
ESPN Blacksburg is W226AT Christiansburg, WPIN AM Dublin, and W246CR Christiansburg.
It's the Drive Sports Center at the top of the hour. Coming up tonight in the NBA playoffs, the Golden State Warriors host the Houston Rockets for Game 4 of the West Finals at 9 p.m. The Warriors currently lead that series 2-1. In Hokie sports news, the Virginia Tech lacrosse team had never won more than 11 games in a single season before 2018. They had never won more than 2 ACC contests. It had never won a game at the ACC championships, and it had never earned a bid to the NCAA tournament. All of those barriers were broken this past season as the Hokies went 14-7, including 5-2 in the ACC, and advanced to the second round of the NCAA tournament, thanks in large part to the senior class. For your ESPN Sports Center, I'm Brian Green.
It's time now for The Drive.
Alrighty then.
On ESPN Blacksburg, 93.1, 97.1, and live on the web at ESPNBlacksburg.com.
It's The Drive on your local radio station. We are ESPN Blacksburg, and a good Tuesday afternoon to all of you. My name is Paul Van Wagner. Brian C. Reed is in the other studio taking your calls at 866-961-1430, 866-961-1430 is the number to call. You can also text us. The AA automatic transmission text line is open and ready to serve you. That number is also 866-961-1430. Andrew's also here with us today. You doing all right over there?
I'm doing fine.
All right. Are you ready for this one? This might get a little weird. I'm not going to lie.
To myself. No matter how hard I'm trying to.
Scott Nason.
I want
Scott.
all to myself.
Scott Nason.
Scott.
I love Scott like a love song, baby. When you're ready, come and get
Scott Nason.
Scott.
Scott Nason. Scott Nason. Scott Nason.
Absolutely, let's go.
Scott Michael Nason joining us today. How are you, my man?
I'm doing wonderful, Paul. I'm always nervous when somebody uses my middle name, but I'll take it in this case. Glad to be on, ready to talk some sports.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. So let's talk a little NHL. Tampa Bay, Washington. Washington looked like the team last night that we kind of all expect them to be. I feel like we've had this conversation before, but yet it seems to continuously happen every single time, every single series, every single year with the Washington Capitals. Here we are now, a Game 7 to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Scott, what do you think of this series so far?
This series has been as strange of a series as I think we've seen in the playoffs. Really hard to figure out how this one's going to end up. I mean, you look at the first two games in Tampa, Washington has their way coming back home. You figure, okay, it's the Capitals, but they got this. You know, they got to make this easy on themselves. And then they don't. Then Tampa wins 2 in Washington, so the series is tied at 2. Tampa wins Game 5, which I kind of expected. So you go back to Washington, and you wonder if the Capitals are going to remind themselves that they are, in fact, the Capitals of the last 20 years. And they didn't. And they played as good a game as I think they played all playoffs last night. Holtby with the big game in net winning. But what I like the best out of that entire game, Paul, and I think what Capitals fans have to really like is they did it without Ovechkin last night, and you're seeing more of the depth on Washington, especially at the center position. I mean, Kuznetsov has had one heck of a playoff. You had Oshie score a couple goals, and another guy that hadn't really scored at all during the playoffs. So Game 7, Wednesday, is going to come down to goaltending, probably going to come down to bounces, dare I say, Paul, might even come down to some puck luck.
Yeah, there you go. Devontae Smith-Pelly was the one that scored that other goal for the Capitals. You look at the major statistics, Scott. Total shots, Capitals win that. Hits, Capitals win that. Takeaways, Capitals win that. Face-off ones, Capitals win that. This isn't a tough sport. If you do the little things that make the difference, you're going to win games in the NHL. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with Washington is when they win the statistical categories, they seem to find a way to win the games. It's when it's the other way that they lose. And it doesn't matter if it's Tampa, Pittsburgh, Columbus. It always seems to be that way with Washington.
Yeah, it really does. And, you wonder how much Tampa really wanted that game. I'm not saying that they didn't want that game, but Washington played like the team that needed it more.
Right.
Obviously, they did to extend the series. And, you look at a Game 7, statistically, home teams in Game 7 have the advantage. You look at the Tampa roster, and they really are built for this. But
right.
I don't know. The intangibles and how that game ended up last night makes me think that maybe it's Washington's year. Maybe it's their year to, shake another monkey off their back and get back to their first Stanley Cup in 20 years.
Well, and it's interesting because the one thing that I said Washington needed to do, they didn't do, yet they still won, and that was to stay out of the penalty box. 9 penalty minutes for Washington, just 7 for Tampa Bay. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's one less power play for the Capitals, yet they didn't let Tampa capitalize on those power plays, and I think that's huge for the Caps.
And it is, and Washington did capitalize on the power play last night and got a big goal. And you look at some of these guys that you don't mention a lot, and a couple that stood out to me that have really helped Washington in their depth is Lars Eller and Tom Wilson. Wilson last night was just amazing on defense, especially in the second half of that game. And, when he's not taking penalties, that's one of his knocks is he takes too many penalties. Didn't happen last night, and you said it, Paul. Washington wins those statistical battles. They win those battles for the puck. And they stay out of the penalty box. They are obviously a much better team, and it's really anybody's game in Game 7. Yeah. I don't think there is a favorite right now.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a pick'em. Vegas wins in the West. Our friends, our colleagues in Canada are beside themselves. 1993, the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup. The internet wasn't even invented back then. The Vegas Golden Knights eliminate the last Canadian team in Winnipeg. Potentially, Scott, we could have a Stanley Cup Finals that features a team from a swamp versus a team from a desert.
Well played, sir. Well played indeed. Well, we definitely know there will be one from the desert.
Yeah.
And, you look at this Vegas team, and there's so much you can say. I mean, this is a team nobody thought, I'm talking nobody thought they would be in the Stanley Cup Finals. There were many people, including myself, that thought, this is a pretty good roster. They made some solid moves. It helped that they had a lot of cap room, and that's where they got a lot of these players that maybe they wouldn't have. And the way the expansion draft and situation was, they got a good goaltender. Marc-Andre Fleury is having a career playoff year. He can lose the Stanley Cup and still win the Conn Smythe with his numbers. But you look at how they dismantled Winnipeg. They lose Game 1 in Winnipeg, a team I thought was going to not only make the Stanley Cup but win. And then after that, they didn't even trail in a game. They won 4 straight, not even trailing. And this is a team that they don't have any superstars, maybe outside their goaltender, but they have a good team, and they really put the TEAM in team. I think that's how you spell it. And this is just a great story. I mean, you have people flying into Vegas now, and the first thing I don't want to use the correct term, the person on the microphone says is, "Welcome to Vegas, home of the Golden Knights." Now, if you ever thought that was even possible 6 months ago, you're crazy. It's a good story for the NHL. I supported them getting a team, and boy, they're making me feel pretty good about my support. Great story with Vegas.
Well, yeah, and before the season, Vegas had Vegas at 500-1 odds. You know that there were some people in Las Vegas that had to drop, even if it's $20, man. Like that's a decent little payday for you. If that's what, that 10 grand is the number right?
It's something like that, but it's a lot more money than they bet. And I mean, you look at we saw that a couple years ago in the Premier League. We've talked about so many times. Leicester City 5,000-1 odds, but with the Supreme Court decision last week, we're allowing states to have legalized sports gambling. You're going to see a lot more states get involved. But 500-1 odds. I think at the beginning of the season, it might have gone down to 200. Even at the beginning of the playoffs, you had pretty good odds for Vegas. And boy, I wouldn't bet against them right now. They got a hot goalie. They got players playing out of their minds, having career years, and they get the lead they don't give it up. Very rarely. They didn't in that Winnipeg series, and I like Vegas right now. They're looking as good as anybody.
I know it was a money thing and an age thing, but do you think Pittsburgh right now is kicking themselves? Marc-Andre Fleury, they let him go. They felt that Matt Murray was, if not a better, at least an even goaltender with Marc-Andre Fleury. Do you think they're kicking themselves now for making that decision, Scott?
I think they have to be right now. Maybe over the long term it will play out. Murray much younger than Fleury,
Right.
about 10 years younger, I believe. And so, 5, 6, 7 years from now, if Murray wins a couple cups and everything's hunky-dory, nobody complains. But if Fleury goes on to win this year, who knows, next year, and he may have a couple left in him, and Murray falters, well, you have no question. And that was one of the advantages that Vegas had is teams could only protect one goalie, and everybody knew whoever Pittsburgh wasn't going to protect was going to be one of the main goalies that Vegas would. And the other thing that helped Vegas this year is they were the only expansion team. We saw in the last expansion draft in 2000, both Columbus and Minnesota were involved, and so you had less talent to get from. And I think come the next expansion team, which I believe could be Seattle, I think the NHL might look at maybe doing some things a little differently, because I don't know if they want an expansion team winning the Stanley Cup. I don't think that was maybe the plan heading into the expansion draft.
True.
I was looking up the stuff on people who bet on the Vegas Golden Knights. Analysis by a guy named Jim Murphy, who runs a sports website, but this is on Forbes.com, so it seems legit.
Sure.
Says that basically 99.99% of all of the original preseason bets on the Golden Knights, based on the amount of money, were probably just for a keepsake for the team's first season.
Okay.
That being said, they're saying that if the Golden Knights do pull it off, this could be the biggest loss for Vegas in like decades. So Vegas's team could end up bankrupting Vegas. Talk about irony. I just can't think of anything more.
I mean, you got 2.2 million people that live in Las Vegas. If half of those people do that bet for, the sake of making a bet on them at the beginning of the series, again, even if it's $20, that's $10,000 that each of those people are going to have to get paid out. And you know darn well that the people aren't just betting $20 on that. They're throwing a hundo, or like Brian Reed, $1,000. Just randomly making it rain.
That's a lot.
yeah.
That could be a lot of Kit Kat bars.
That would be a lot of Kit
That's
Kat
a lot of
bars,
Kit Kat.
Brian.
And it's like they don't even have to walk far to do it. They don't even have to go far to do it.
Scott Nason, did they find you?
He's on the run.
Man.
No, I think they found some sports bookies that are worried about paying out the Vegas bets right now here in the northern Michigan area. But you look at what happened with Leicester City in England, Paul.
Yeah.
The sports bookies had to pay out over £3 million to those that put out on the 5,000 to 1 odds there. So yeah, Vegas could be a little less, have a little less money in the coffers after this Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup Finals slated to start Monday, May 28th. If Tampa wins, they'll be in Tampa. If Washington wins, they'll be in Vegas. I know you're going to be watching. I'll be watching also. I encourage everybody out there listening to tune in and enjoy it. Even if you're a Caps fan and for some reason they don't make it, I kind of want I want it to be the Caps Vegas, but at this point, I just kind of like this Vegas story, Scott.
Yeah, I kind of prefer it to be the Caps as well, Paul. Tampa's been there. They won in 2004. Of course, they have a Detroit Red Wings connection with their general manager, Steve Yzerman, as does the Vegas Golden Knights with their head coach, Gerard Gallant.
True.
But if you haven't watched any hockey at all, just make sure you tune into the pregame of the Vegas game.
Yes!
It's unbelievable. You got to watch it. It's so good.
Yes, I agree. It's actually on YouTube, so you can even just check it out now. Scott, where can our listeners hear more from you?
Well, I'm currently getting ready to set up for my sports show, The Game, tonight. We'll have it online around 9 o'clock, and you can find it at thegamesportshow.podbean.com, talking about the Stanley Cup, NBA, Major League Baseball, among other things.
I love that show. It's one of my favorites. Scott, as always, my man, have a good one. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Scott Nason, we appreciate him. We'll be right back. It's The Drive.
ESPN Blacksburg. We speak sports.